Hello and welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Thursday, July 7th, and we have a great show for you today. We have Haven Montgomery, a rising sophomore at Brookline High School who is a student activist focused on reproductive rights. A great interview recorded earlier, but first, as always, we are going to work through the news. War still rages in Ukraine as Russia attacks not just military personnel, but also civilians, shopping malls, and hospitals. In the United States, another mass shooting took place. A shooter opened fire on an Independence Day parade in Highland Park, Illinois, leaving 6 dead and dozens injured. The suspected shooter has been detained, and for those keeping score, there have been approximately 2 mass shootings per day, every day in the year 2022. The Supreme Court released a ruling last week limiting the Environmental Protection Agency's authority to regulate carbon dioxide emissions from power plants. Gasoline and diesel prices are dropping in Massachusetts. The average price for gasoline in the Commonwealth is now 20 cents lower than it was on June 12th. For the first time since 2019, 4th of July celebrations returned to the Esplanade. Hundreds gathered to watch the Boston Pops and were dazzled by a spectacular fireworks show over the Charles River later in the evening. Local law enforcement agencies have reported that they had no advance knowledge of the white nationalist march that took place in Boston over the weekend and led to an alleged assault. On every weekday from July 5th to August 19th, free meals will be provided for anyone who needs them at the Brookline Avenue Playground from 8:30 to 9 a.m. and again from noon to 1 p.m. There will also be fun activities for children ages 18 and under. Brookline Town Administrator Mel Kleckner is retiring in September, and the 3 finalists for Brookline's next town administrator have been announced. They are Charles Carey, who previously served in numerous roles in New York City government, Jennifer DePazzo Gilbert, who previously served as Brookline's town council, and George Ramirez, who currently serves as the executive director of the Lawrence Partnership. And now we're going to flip over to an interview recorded earlier today, again with Haven Montgomery, a rising sophomore at Brookline High School. And we're going to talk about reproductive rights and abortion. And I hope you'll stay tuned and learn about what Haven Montgomery has been working on and what's coming ahead down on the Boston Common. Stay tuned.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And as promised, we have an outstanding interview today. We're here with Haven Montgomery, a rising sophomore at Brookline High School. Haven, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited. We're going to talk about reproductive rights today, and it's a topic that is exciting right now, terrifying right now. It's certainly important on the national stage. It impacts different people in very different, meaningful ways, and it can sometimes make people uncomfortable. And that's what this show is about. And so I'm sort of telling the viewers, if this is not what you want to watch, you can feel free to move along to something else and tune in next week. But that's on the docket for today. So Haven, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the topic at hand.
Hi, my name is Haven Montgomery. As you said, I'm going to be a sophomore in September at Brookline High School. I have been fighting for reproductive rights for a long time, and just women's rights in general since I was a little kid. As someone that is obviously like a woman, it's just really close to me for obvious reasons.
Well, you say it's for obvious reasons, but there are many people who could become pregnant who aren't fighting like you are. So there's something about the topic or about you that is a little different, and maybe we'll figure out what that is. Maybe we won't, but I do want to push a little bit more and hear prior to the Dobbs decision and prior to sort of the very recent national attention, what are some of the ways that you've been involved or thinking about this, or what experiences maybe have you had with other advocacy groups prior to even a couple of weeks ago?
Obviously, like I have faced sexism my entire life, like even in ways that aren't really obvious. Like when I was little, it's like I hear it really often in schools, teachers will be like, oh, like we need a strong boy to carry these chairs, or like being on a sports team as like a little girl and not being treated as important as like a boy on a sports team. So to me, there was never really like a feeling of like, oh, like should I get involved in this? I've just like always kind of been involved in it. So some things I've been doing recently is obviously like there's so many rallies going on. I've been attending as many as possible. My high school had a walkout, which I spoke at. And then also really important is to just like speak out, tell your friends and family, get people involved because we're stronger together.
And I'm glad you mentioned that for you and for some people, certainly not all, the conversation about reproductive rights is part of a broader conversation about equal rights for people who identify as women, and even more broadly than that, right? It's about making sure that people are treated fairly as individuals and as groups, despite the fact that there are some physical differences between them. And abortion and reproductive rights are part of, but not the entirety of that. It's certainly a big part, though. And it's a big part right now. So I understand that you have a rally planned in support of reproductive rights in Brookline. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the rally will be on Sunday, July 17th at 2 p.m. in front of the State House right near Boston Commons. And our demands is that not only do we want abortion to be legal, we want there to be fair access for anyone who needs an abortion, no matter gender, race, class. Like it should just be equal for everyone.
Now, is this a rally for people from Brookline? Who's the audience? Who are the set of people who you would be inviting?
Like I said before, we are stronger together. So everyone should come. Anyone that could come should come because the more people, the better.
And are you working with advocacy groups or other organizations to get the word out, to provide support at the event, to organize?
We're in the process of reaching out to groups right now. We have a few. I don't want to say any because I'm not 100% sure how confirmed we are. But yeah, we are working to get some people right now.
That's great, because as you can imagine, even the logistics are not obvious to get right the first time. And you want to get it right because you want to make sure that your message comes out loud and strong. And it's an important message. There have been a few other rallies on the Common about abortion rights and abortion access and reproductive rights since the Dobbs decision. But I think voices are growing. And I think that as people are observing how different governments are responding one way or another, they're realizing that this really is a big deal. And so you said Sunday, July 17th, 2 p.m. at the Boston Common. Are you thinking like near the State House at those steps? Is that where we should go?
Yeah, we'll be right in front of the State House.
Sweet. And obviously, folks from Brookline can take the Green Line to Park Street Station. There are certainly other ways to get there as well. And so you're having it in front of the State House. Is the goal to influence state government in particular, or state and federal? Like who do you want to hear what you're saying?
Obviously, like I want like people with higher power, like above me, to hear. But I also want everyone out there to know that we are here and we're not going to go quiet. Anyone that like might feel like alone during this time or support during this time, I want them to know that we have their back and that we're fighting for them.
And I know that some folks have been following, and maybe others haven't heard, that actually the Massachusetts legislature is currently debating some reproductive rights legislation. So the Senate passed a bill as part of their budget process, and the House has passed a standalone bill. I can tell you more about the House bill than the Senate bill since I voted on the House bill. And I think the House actually did some of the things you mentioned earlier that I'm particularly excited about. The House, in an effort to protect folks from these bounty hunter laws that other states have imposed, passed laws that would protect both abortion providers as well as people who receive medical treatment, including abortions, while they are in Massachusetts. And really, we need federal legislation to stop this bounty hunter nonsense entirely. The state has limited powers there under federalism, but we're doing what we can there. But another thing that the House did that I'm really proud of in thinking about making sure that access in practice matches our philosophy, we learned something from COVID. The COVID vaccines, of course, were covered by insurance. And if you didn't have insurance, were covered anyway, but were covered without copay or deductible. And we passed that same requirement that insurance must cover abortions, with an exception for things like Catholic charities, which really the Supreme Court has effectively required, at no copay and no deductible, because we did want to make sure that, the idea that someone who's pregnant work another 3 or 4 shifts in the restaurant to get enough money in tips to be able to pay for the abortion procedure is really abhorrent, right? If this is something that's right for you after talking with your doctor, let's go ahead and be supportive, not create extra hurdles. So we said no deductible, no copay. And I'm glad that that's something that you're talking about, because I think it is, people have such different experiences and are in different journeys throughout their lives, that if we mean pro-choice, we mean pro-choice for everybody, not just for people who were born identified as a woman, not just for people who can afford a procedure, not just for people who are old enough that they don't need consent from a parent or a judge, for everybody. And so I'm glad you're fighting for that. Now, the Massachusetts legislature, the House and the Senate, we have to agree on a final bill. And one of the things I'm really glad about your efforts is it's putting more pressure on us to get that agreement, because we have 2 different bills that have passed, but we don't have any laws yet, right? And so I'm hopeful that, frankly, part of the direction of July 17th is to tell reps and senators, hey, figure it out, nail down that language, agree to something, pass it, because this is too important to waste time and squabble over that other stuff. And so that's part of, what I hope to see in the near term in Massachusetts. What are your visions for what you'd like to see in Massachusetts and perhaps in other states or across the country with respect to reproductive rights for Americans and anyone else who happens to be in America at the time?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what you just said, that, abortion is a lot more than just having legal abortion, but making sure people have access to abortion, because it's hard for people to take time off work, to find childcare, to get enough money. So I just want it to be able that abortion, of course I want it to be legal, and that is so important, but we also need to make sure there is access to abortion. And though we're really lucky to live in Massachusetts, where we have these things in the process, there are so many people out there, and even people in Massachusetts, that are hurting and that don't have the same privileges as us. So I just want us, in Massachusetts, around all of America, to come together to help each other, because if one of us is hurting, we are all hurting.
And some of this public debate and dialogue has centered around the Supreme Court, who, of course, ruled on Dobbs 6-3 to eliminate 49-year-old presumed to be settled law, Roe v. Wade. Do you have opinions about the Congress, the president, the Supreme Court, how federal government should move forward given what we've seen the Supreme Court do recently?
I find it really unfair because, as a country, we do like preach like power to the people, and we are the people. But like at a time like this, I feel so powerless. And even doing all these things to try to fight for what I deserve and what is just, I still feel like I'm so much smaller than people that have power in our government. And I don't think like people should have to feel that way. Like we all have voices, and not only are we able to use those voices like I'm doing right now, but those voices should be heard.
Now, obviously, there's a big group of people, they call themselves pro-life, who also want to be heard and have a different perspective. And I'm not asking you to litigate 50 years of arguments for and against abortion, but is there a straightforward guidance on how to decide how to move forward when there are voices who want drastically different public policies?
I think a lot of people, I mean, of course, there's some people that are pro-life that I think are just ignorant, and you're not going to be able to change their mind because this is just the way they think. But there are also a lot of people that just like haven't had the education and don't properly understand and are like caught in the ways like abortion is murder, like people having abortion is so wrong, like they're murdering a baby. But it's so important to be able to see in other people's perspectives. So like if I were to tell someone who is pro-life, I would just tell them that they should look at other people's perspectives, like the perspective of like the teenage girl that's throwing away her life, or the perspective of someone who can't afford children and is going to have a kid that can't grow up having the opportunities that they deserve, or even the perspective of a child that is going to be brought into the world and be unwanted by their parents.
So you talked about education a little bit there, and it's something I've been wondering about. Now, my oldest child is 11, so his experience is several years behind yours. And I'll ask you, for your personal experience in Brookline, and then we'll sort of move outward from there. I'm thinking about sex ed, sort of gender and sexuality education in schools. Obviously, kids learn from their parents. They learn from each other. They learn from television. They learn from the internet, and some of what they're learning is true and some of it is not. And so what are your experiences in Brookline Public Schools with respect to sex ed writ large? Personally, do you feel like you've had a good experience? Tell us about that.
So sex ed is taught in Brookline schools, and I think the program is pretty good. It's definitely a lot better than a lot of other schools, but there's still gaps, and there's always like that feeling of uncomfortableness around certain topics, especially like we're talking about a lot now, like should sexuality be taught in schools? And I think 100% yes. So though Brookline education does have good programs, there's still ways it can be improved.
And there's a very narrow view of sexuality, and then there's a much broader view. What are your thoughts on how comprehensive what are some of the things you would like to see covered that maybe aren't yet covered, that you think would be helpful to people your age in making knowledgeable, healthy decisions?
In schools, I find I think not even just in sex education, like environments for like middle school and older, but even for kindergartners, there should just be kind of an exposure, and it doesn't have to be like 24/7, obviously, that's all you're talking about, but like just having children's books that include like a gay couple, or maybe like we watch a movie in class that has a non-binary character. I feel like just that exposure is so important and needs to be seen more in schools.
And when we get to the high school level, where we really are talking about young adults, not children, should we be teaching about abortion?
I think so.
Okay, and I don't disagree, and these are not gotcha questions. I think this is sort of an important conversation to have. We should be talking about birth control,
Yeah.
right? That's part of sex ed. Diseases, of course, right? Um, do you feel like whether or not it was adequate or broad enough, do you feel like the sex ed that you received has helped you make better choices or be more knowledgeable or comfortable around the topic?
I definitely think like there's a lot of things you learn in sex ed that like help you in life, and but there's still so many like misinformation out there, and like so many people that still like don't understand like what an abortion is, or like as I was saying before, like there's people that are just ignorant because they haven't had the proper education. And I think that proper education is so important, because like if someone thinks like you're out here like abortion is just like killing like a baby, that's not what it is. So it definitely like needs to be more clear, and needs to be like 100% sure that everyone understands.
Now, there's a bill that you may be aware of because you are such an amazing advocate, but I want to mention for others, it's called the Healthy Youth Act. It's been filed several times in both the House and the Senate. It's pretty simple, and it relates to this topic, which is why I was glad we had the opportunity to talk about it. It says public schools must teach age-appropriate sex ed, and that is the very broad, comprehensive version of sex ed. That's not just sexual reproduction, but about sexuality, about public health, about decision making, about personal health, about disease. We have not managed to get it to the floor for a vote. I suspect it's a bill that you would support based on everything you've said so far. I encourage you to take a look at it if you haven't yet. I certainly support it. And it's why I was glad to ask you some questions about your experience in a school district which is known for being relatively progressive as compared to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and high performing, right? Brookline Public Schools are some of the best public schools in the state. And so I suspect that even there's certainly room for Brookline schools to improve around education for sexuality and health. I'm sure that there's opportunity for other schools as well. So I hope that you'll have a look at that bill and be thinking about that as well, because I think no one bill or policy solves a problem, these sorts of problems, but we can make progress there. And I think that you would find that bill to be a good bill to include in addition to bills that are specifically about abortion or specifically about birth control. If it's okay, I'd like to take another step back and just sort of talk about youth engagement in politics. You know, you're a rising sophomore. You've got a couple of years until you have the right to vote, but you've managed to find ways to influence public policy outside of the ballot box. How common is this? You know, how many high schoolers are sort of thinking outside the four walls of Greeno Street?
As I was saying before, like ever since I was little, I've seen sexism in my day-to-day life. And growing up, you know, when I was like 8 or 7, I used to make little signs of construction paper like women's rights matter and like march around my town. So it doesn't matter your age, like this affects everyone. And even if it doesn't affect you, it affects someone around you. It affects a neighbor, it affects someone you love. So it doesn't matter your age. If you can do something, if you can say something, do it. Like we have to be the change. We are the people and we have the power.
And do you feel like your peers support your efforts? Do they feel energized? And do you feel energized from them in these efforts?
I think a lot of my peers do, because like I said, we see sexism every single day. And even when people don't notice it, it's still there. But it's hard because especially for teenage girls, there's a lot of talk like, oh, like they're just dramatic, like they're gonna grow out of it, like it's just a phase. And if this is dramatic, then I will be so much more dramatic, because we have to keep fighting. Like we have to, even though it's scary, even though it's hard, we can't give up.
I love it. I love it. And you've talked about your motivation centered at least in part from your personal experience as a girl and now a young woman. Are there boys and young men who are with you on this?
There is not as much as I think there should be, because when people are like, oh, this doesn't affect me, it doesn't matter. But there is some, like, I don't want to act like there's no one out there, because there's a lot of supporters that aren't only women.
And this may be challenging space, or this may be really comfortable. How does this effort that in your experience focused around sexism and reproductive rights relate to members of the LGBTQ community? Is there overlap? Are they two separate issues? Is there a lot of support? What has been your experience in that regard?
There's definitely a lot of overlap, because women are not the only people that need abortion. There's non-binary people, gender non-conforming people, trans men that all need abortion and all deserve the same treatment as the rest of us. Like, it's already so hard for people of the LGBTQ plus community to even find a healthcare provider that can properly suit their needs. So abortion obviously is going to be so difficult, and we need to make sure that the access is for everyone.
This has been fantastic. I'm so glad you came on the show, and I'm so glad that you gave Brookline Interactive Group viewers, many of whom are 2 generations past where you are in life and lived through different eras of feminism and women's rights movements, who I know are cheering you on, and I know are so proud of the work you're doing. And it is really important work. So I want to remind our viewers, July 17th.
Yeah.
Right. That is a
2
Saturday
p.m.
or Sunday?
Sunday,
July 17, 2 p.m. at the Boston Common, right at the corner nearest the State House. If you take the Green Line to Park Street, go upstairs and make a left and walk up the sidewalk inside the park, you'll be there. It's going to be amazing. It's so important. And if for no other reason, come to support Haven Montgomery, who's doing amazing work, but come to support civil rights for people, and like civil rights for people, period, right? Like that's what we're looking for, all people. Haven, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
We'll see you on the 17th, if not sooner.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Be well.